It's late at night, and the office is quiet. Everyone else has left, but Yeonju heads to Jinhyun's office. She steps in carefully, getting his attention. He looks up, his expression unreadable at first, but then his gaze softens. He gestures for her to come closer, and she hesitates, but moves toward him. She places her leg over his as he pulls her closer. The tension is heavy, and they draw nearer. Their connection deepens without the need for words. Jinhyun, always composed, now lets a different side show. Yeonju, unsure but drawn in, tries to steady herself as they get closer. The air between them shifts when a faint sound outside catches Jinhyun's attention. He stops, alert, and signals for quiet. The moment hangs in suspense. They listen, waiting. A knock at the door startles them. Jinhyun's demeanor changes instantly, calm and in control. He answers the knock, offering a quick explanation. The guard outside seems satisfied and leaves without further question. The quiet returns, the interruption now a distant concern. Jinhyun looks back at her, his expression as confident as ever, as if nothing happened. The moment, though briefly paused, is far from over. The security guard walks away to check the copier, and the room falls silent again. Jinhyun pulls Yeonju closer, their connection deepening in the quiet. He pauses for a moment, looking directly into her eyes, his voice calm but firm. Yeonju blinks, realizing her thoughts have drifted. She's suddenly aware of how she feels, a mix of confusion and unease. She wonders how what started as a simple, physical connection has grown more complicated. The realization feels dangerous, a thread she knows she needs to cut before it tightens around her heart. The next day at work, Yeonju sits quietly at her desk in the bustling office. She's distracted, replaying her thoughts from the night before, when a voice interrupts her. It's the assistant manager, walking toward her desk with his usual upbeat tone. His comment about her being late makes her self-conscious. She knows she usually arrives early to prepare everything for the team, but hearing it pointed out feels different today. His casual mention of handling the tasks himself makes her reflect. She wonders if her eagerness to prove herself has turned into something people just expect. Before she can say much, a colleague nearby chimes in, brushing off the assistant manager's effort and comparing it to others who've been consistent for years. The comment feels unnecessary, but Yeonju stays calm, assuring everyone that she enjoys helping out. Shifting the conversation, she reminds the assistant manager about an important order. He responds smoothly, thanking her in his usual charming way. She notices how easily he deflects attention while still managing to sound sincere. Another colleague, watching the exchange, teases them, hinting at how well they seem to get along. Yeonju doesn't respond, but the assistant manager keeps his focus on her, asking for her help to ensure everything goes smoothly. As he walks away, Yeonju feels a mix of emotions. She isn't sure if his words are genuine or just part of his usual demeanor. Either way, she knows she'll handle the task. It's just another day at work, but the weight of her own thoughts lingers. The atmosphere in the office feels light at first, with casual chatter filling the room. Then, a firm voice from the entrance breaks through. It's the team leader, Kang Jinhyun, announcing a team meeting at 11 a.m. He walks straight toward Yeonju's desk, instructing her to reserve the meeting room and send out the email. She responds quickly, hurrying off to complete the task. Almost instantly, the mood in the office shifts. The air grows heavy, and the chatter fades as everyone focuses on their work. Across the room, Assistant Manager Lee Jr. mentions something about missing orders from Indian companies, trying to get a conversation going. He's met with a sharp question about whether he's investigating the issue or just chatting. Junior hesitates, caught off guard, and mutters something about checking it out. He can't shake the uneasy feeling settling over the office, and wonders why the tension feels thicker than usual this morning. Kang Jinhyun, the man in charge of turning around the struggling overseas sales team, is at the center of everyone's unease. Rumored to come from a wealthy chaebol family, his reputation for efficiency and blunt criticism keeps the team on edge. Everyone knows he's here to fix the team's poor performance, and his high standards weigh heavily on them. The meeting begins, and it doesn't take long for Jin-hyun to dive into the issues. He skims through the reports with a sharp eye, clearly unimpressed. His dissatisfaction is obvious as he questions the point of reports that don't offer actionable insight. The assistant, flustered, tries to explain, but Jin-hyun cuts through the excuses, pointing out how easily such information can be verified elsewhere. Yeonju sits quietly, watching the scene unfold. She can't help but feel the pressure mounting on everyone. Keeping up with someone as precise and demanding as Jin-hyun seems impossible. She notices how stressed her colleagues look and worries about how much they are struggling under his scrutiny. The focus shifts to Lee Jr. again, when Jin-hyun asks about the stock levels for a specific product. Jr. fumbles with his response, trying to explain how the data is accessed, but Jin-hyun isn't having it. His frustration spills over as he points out how basic the task is, comparing it to something even a child could manage. The room falls silent under his glare, but then Yeonju speaks up, breaking the tension. She confidently states the correct stock level, earning Jin-hyun's approval. He acknowledges her effort, calling her the only one in the team who seems to take her work seriously. The praise is short-lived, though, as Jin-hyun quickly turns his attention back to the rest of the team. His criticism sharpens, cutting through their excuses, as he demands more effort and thought in their work. The meeting ends, leaving the team shaken. Yeonju returns to her desk, her mind swirling with thoughts. She wonders how long they can keep up with Jin-hyun's expectations, and if anyone will ever feel confident working under his relentless pressure. Yeonju watches the clock as night falls, and most of her co-workers start packing up to leave. A few of them approach her, asking for help finishing up their work since they have other commitments. She checks the time and realizes it's already 10 o'clock. For a moment, she hesitates, wondering if it was a mistake to offer her help. But then, she reminds herself she needs the money and the overtime pay, so she pushes the thought aside. Just a little longer, she tells herself, trying to stay motivated as she continues to work. Just then, Jin-hyun walks into the office. He notices her still at her desk and raises an eyebrow. "What are you still doing here? It's not even time to clock out yet," he says, taking off his coat. His sudden appearance surprises her, and she wonders what he's doing in the office so late. He approaches her desk, his curiosity evident. "Did anyone ask you to stay for overtime?" he asks, glancing at her computer screen. Then, he looks at the task she's working on and asks, "Is the sales data collection for Japan your job?" Yeonju quickly explains that she only offered to help out. Jin-hyun then asks if she's eaten yet. He seems concerned, almost teasing, as he looks at her cup of coffee. "You're not planning on having that as your dinner, are you?" he asks, though Yeonju reassures him that she's already had dinner. Confused by his attention, Yeonju wonders why Jin-hyun is being so considerate. He tells her to organize the data she's collected and send it directly to his email. However, she hesitates, thinking it might be better if he takes over the task instead. Jin-hyun insists, gently persuading her to eat from the lunchbox he's expecting in 15 minutes, and encourages her to clock out after eating. Reluctantly, she agrees, knowing that she can use the break, and tells herself that it's okay to take a step back for a moment. Despite the long day, the kindness feels unexpected and leaves her wondering about the motives behind it. After hours of working in front of the monitor, Yeonju tells Jin-hyun that she'll send the completed work to his email as soon as she finishes. Jin-hyun looks at her with concern, noticing how late it's getting. "What time is it now?" "You're still working without having dinner?" he asks, genuinely caring. He tells her to stop for the night and take a break, warning her that she's making things harder on herself by always accepting work from others. Yeonju tries to explain, but Jin-hyun cuts her off. "You don't have to apologize to me," he says. Just make sure to eat every last bite when the lunchbox arrives, he adds, walking away. As he heads out, he mentions that if she's purposely dieting, she should stop, pointing out that she's too skinny, and that her bones make a sound when she moves. He admits that losing weight isn't bad, but he's clearly concerned. When Heeju arrives home later that night, she notices that the house is quiet. From the looks of it, her aunt and her nephew have gone out for a meal. She assumes she'll do the dishes to keep herself busy. Her thoughts drift to the past. Her father had been diagnosed with lung cancer when she was in middle school. Her mom passed away when she was around 10, and after that, her father worked hard, leaving her to be cared for by her grandmother. Before he died, he left money for her aunt, asking her to take care of Heeju. However, her aunt's business failed, and Heeju had to transfer to a commercial high school instead of the trade school she had always wanted to attend. Listen to your aunt and take care of your grandmother, her father had said, and those words stuck with her. As Heeju continues washing the dishes, she hears her name called out. It's her aunt's husband, asking her to come to his room, because he has something to talk about. Heeju immediately realizes that her aunt and nephew hadn't gone out for a meal, they had gone out to avoid him. She hurries, hoping to finish whatever conversation he wants to have so she can leave the house as soon as possible. He shouts at her, asking if she's ignoring him, but she responds quickly, saying she's on her way. She doesn't want to stay in the house any longer than necessary, knowing what this conversation is likely going to be about. Heeju quickly hurries to her room, hoping her uncle won't come in. She tells herself that she needs to stay away for a while since he's home. She starts packing her things, planning to be out of the house for a few days. But then she hears him yelling from outside the door. "Aren't you going to open the door?" he shouts. Scared, Heeju asks why he's doing this, but his angry response is full of accusations. He tells her that he pulled her from a difficult situation, and that she's not grateful. "This is how you repay me," he yells. He continues, saying that he's the head of the household, and that she shouldn't disrespect him just because she's making some money now. His words are harsh and full of abuse. Terrified, Heeju tells him that if he doesn't stop, she'll call the police. He laughs and dares her to do it. He finally forces the door open, grabbing hold of her. She pleads with him to stop, but in a panic, she grabs a glass and cuts his eye before quickly running out of the house with her bag. As she hurries down the street, her phone buzzes. It's a message from Jinhyun, her team leader, asking her to meet him at the P Hotel right now. She feels conflicted, thinking it will be difficult this time, especially since it's the first time she's rejected his offer. She recalls how much she likes the way his big hand touches her. The next day at work, Heeju is in a meeting with Jinhyun. He flips through some documents and asks, "Did you pull all the sales data for Youngsin Company from last January to this month?" She stands there, lost in thought, not responding. Jinhyun notices and calls her name, Yoon Heeju, Yoon Heeju. She snaps back to reality and responds, "Yes." Realizing she's been distracted, Jinhyun gently reminds her, "You should always focus on work when you're working." He continues going over the data, and Heeju quickly gathers herself and starts paying attention. He then asks, "The agent fees here are higher than other places. Do you know why?" Heeju explains that the fees were set by the former team leader, Kim Kyujin. Jinhyun listens carefully before saying, "For now, I'm not approving this." He decides to talk to Executive Director Park about it and closes the meeting. Heeju leaves the meeting feeling a bit uneasy. She's trying to focus on the work, but with everything going on in her life, it's hard to keep her mind in one place. After Heeju finishes parking her files, Jinhyun stops her and asks, "Who did this to you?" He points to the scar on her neck, looking at her seriously. "I haven't left a mark like this recently," he adds, his voice full of concern. Heeju tries to brush it off, saying it's nothing, but Jinhyun insists on knowing who caused the scar. He asks if there's anyone else besides him involved and wonders if she met him yesterday. She denies it, telling him again that it's nothing for him to worry about. Jinhyun firmly tells her that she's not the one to decide what he should care about and orders her to leave his office. When she gets back to her desk, Heeju checks her phone and sees a message from her aunt asking her to come down to the first floor to talk about something. At the first floor, her aunt is waiting for her. She starts by asking, "What are you planning to do from now on?" Heeju feels confused by the question. Her aunt continues, saying she and her husband have been taking care of her, so it's not right for Heeju to act the way she does. She wonders where Heeju learned how to hit people like she did to her husband. Heeju is surprised because she knows her aunt is aware of how her husband is. Her aunt then questions why Heeju is so eager to destroy her uncle and wonders how she pushed her to that point. As her aunt talks, she admits her heart is racing. Heeju asks if her aunt gets hurt often, but her aunt cuts her off and demands medical expenses from her. She says that since Heeju made her uncle look like that, she has to take responsibility. Her aunt claims they are family, so she won't press charges, but she expects Heeju to give her the money she owes. Heeju stands there, lost in thought. Since high school, she has been using her part-time job earnings to pay off her uncle's loans, and even now, after working at a big company for 8 years, a portion of her salary still goes toward it. The money has always been taken from her under the pretense of living expenses, and she feels trapped in a situation she can't escape from. Heeju's voice trembles as she admits she doesn't have any money. Her aunt responds, revealing that she knows about the savings account, surprising Heeju. She asks if her aunt has been going through her room, but her aunt explains she was just cleaning up the mess Heeju left. The conversation quickly turns to the money Heeju saved up, with her aunt pointing out how hard she worked for it. Heeju, frustrated, reminds her of the time she asked for help with Hyung-wook's tuition, but was turned away with the excuse that there was no money. Her aunt is hurt and says that the last bit of affection she had for her has faded. She claims she's been trying to honor her brother's last request to take care of Heeju, and now she feels betrayed. Heeju thinks about why she saved the money in the first place. Her aunt tells her to think about her future, reminding her that her father would be disappointed in her for not helping her family when they needed it. She questions if Heeju had ever thought about that. Tears start to fall from Heeju's eyes, and her aunt, seeing this, tells her not to cry over such a thing. Heeju pleads with her not to bring up her father. Her aunt gets angry, accusing Heeju of making things worse for her uncle and calling her actions criminal. She warns Heeju to keep her voice down since people from work might overhear. In the end, feeling defeated, Heeju agrees to give her the money and begs her aunt to leave her alone. Jinhyun walks into the cafeteria and sees Heeju crying. He watches her for a moment before the waiter hands him his order. Heeju, still in tears, excused herself from her aunt, too upset to notice Jinhyun. She's overwhelmed with sadness, and her thoughts are scattered. At work, she struggles to concentrate, and a senior colleague scolds her for a mistake with the corporate card details that were submitted to higher-ups. She apologizes and promises to fix it, but she's worried because the finance officer is known to be strict. Jinhyun steps in, calling the finance officer himself. He takes full responsibility for the error and arranges for one of the office's staff to fix it. After the call, Jinhyun tells Heeju to go and sort it out. Heeju feels like she has the worst luck. After fixing the issue, Heeju goes to Jinhyun's office to thank him. He asks her to come with him to handle some outside work. Surprised by the request, she agrees, and he tells her to get dressed and meet him in the parking garage. He says he'll wait for her. Once they are in the car, the silence hangs between them. Heeju eventually breaks it by commenting on the plane she sees in the sky. Jinhyun asks if she likes traveling, and she says yes. When he asks where her favorite place is, she admits her travels have been limited to visiting her grandmother's house in the countryside, just local trips. She then asks him where he likes to travel, but he says he doesn't really enjoy traveling. He mentions that the weather is nice, and she wonders which company meeting they are going to or if they have a client nearby. Jin Hyun explains that he's just out for a drive with no particular destination. He says he doesn't travel much, but sometimes a drive helps him clear his mind and makes him feel better. Heeju is surprised by his response, and he asks if that sounds like it has an effect. She's short on words but nods. He smiles and says he's glad to hear that. The car comes to a stop at a spot with a clear view of the sunset. Heeju is so mesmerized by the sight that she comments on how beautiful it is. Jin Hyun watches her for a while, then suggests they should go. Heeju is at the supermarket when she gets a message from her aunt reminding her to pick up her things. Her aunt also mentions she will send the money soon. Heeju thinks to herself that she has a work dinner later and wonders if she should bring the things to the locker at the subway station and pick them up later. She wonders if she can keep bouncing between motels and saunas, considering she might need to take out a cash advance just to rent a tiny room in a Goshawon. As she's lost in thought, her colleague calls her name and teases her, saying it looks like she's dating someone. Surprised, Heeju asks how she came to that conclusion. The colleague mentions she's noticed Heeju wearing the same clothes often and thought maybe she didn't have time to go home. Heeju quickly corrects her, saying she doesn't have anyone. Just then, Assistant Lee Jr. walks into the supermarket. He offers to buy her something to eat and asks her to pick whatever she wants. Heeju says she's fine with what she's already picked, but he insists they pay for everything together and then split the cost later. She notices the large amount of food he's picking and jokes if he plans to eat all that. He explains he's been bored at work and has gained some weight, which has been bothering him. A female colleague then asks Junyo if she can have one egg. Heeju is surprised when Jin Hyun suddenly appears and takes the basket from her, commenting on how much she's bought. The female colleague asks if he could buy some extra items, and he agrees, offering to pay for everything. Heeju is taken aback by his unexpected kindness. At the cashier, the total comes to 138,500 won, and they suggest using the company card since the total is so high. Jin Hyun replies that if they work hard and eat well, it won't be a waste. As they leave, Heeju stays behind to thank him and mentions she'll store any leftovers in the team's snack storage. He asks if she really likes food like that, and Heeju can only stare at him, too speechless to respond. In her mind, she thinks that just seeing him in a bright place makes her feel good. She imagines drinking coffee with him under the sun, or going to a movie together. Heeju offers Jinchan a drink, but he jokingly says he can't drink a flea's liver. The team gathers for dinner, and when Heeju walks into the room, manager Park Jinho asks her to sit close to him. A female colleague begs Heeju to switch seats with her, saying she'll switch back later. Manager Park offers a golden ratio shot, claiming he's never given it to anyone before. His staff jokes that it's unfair since he's never made a SOMAC drink for them. He replies that they should have done something for him in return. He quickly starts the celebration, and everyone cheers. Heeju finds the drink too strong, but Manager Park insists she must finish it. He tops up her glass, saying there's no stopping the second round. Just then, Jinchan walks into the room. The other ladies offer him a seat with them, but he chooses to sit between Heeju and Manager Park. When asked why he sits there when there are other empty seats, he says it's the first time he's sitting with Manager Park and asks him to pour him a drink. Heeju offers Jinchan some water, but she accidentally spills it on his clothes. She quickly apologizes, worried she upset him. He tells her to be more careful and excuses himself from the table. Heeju rushes after him to apologize again. He pulls her into a room and kisses her. She asks if he's drunk, but he says he's not. She takes out a napkin to wipe his clothes. He asks why she brought it, and she quickly apologizes again for spilling water on him. He tells her to stop apologizing so much, saying it's not her fault his clothes got wet. She feels sad, and he kisses her again. He tells her to forget about the dinner, and says he could be with her right there, again and again. He explains that they both seem to be in a similar situation, and he adds that she should know that the way she acts just makes a man want her more. He was thinking of kissing her and sending her back, but now he wants more. Meanwhile, the other staff is looking for the team leader. When they start searching for him, he asks her to stay and wait while he leaves first. A female colleague tries to open the door, but the room attendant stops her, saying she can't open a room that wasn't hers. The colleague protests, explaining she's just looking for the team leader since she can't find him anywhere, not even in the restroom. Yeonju feels relieved when she realizes they've left. Jinan asks if she's okay, telling her to look at him while he compliments her, saying she's pretty. Back in the dinner hall, a colleague asks if she's feeling better after stepping outside. Yeonju tells her that the team leader noticed she had a headache, so she stepped outside for a moment. She assures them that she's fine now. As the dinner continues, Yeonju keeps staring at Jinan, lost in her thoughts. She holds her head, feeling overwhelmed. Her colleague notices and asks if she's really okay because her face looks red. Assistant Lee Jr. offers her a fresh drink, but she politely says she'll just stand by. A female colleague points out that Lee Jr. has been taking care of her without even handing her a tissue. Manager Park jokingly promises to give them a refrigerator as a wedding gift if they get married, and the others urge him to keep his word, claiming they are witnesses. Jinan interrupts them, telling everyone to get up. Lee Jr. is surprised and asks if Jinan doesn't have a video conference to prepare for, urging him to hurry. Jinan agrees, and they both head outside. A colleague asks if he did something wrong to his team leader, and he says no. Everyone says their goodbyes. Yeonju, resting on a log, thinks about going to her aunt's place to collect her things. Just then, she hears a voice asking what she's thinking about. It's Jinan. He asks her what she's thinking so deeply about. She wonders why he hasn't left yet and imagines he might be asking her for a drink. But instead, he tells her he's going to give her a ride. She stands there in shock. He asks if he should carry her, but she quickly responds that she can walk just fine. He tells her to go to the park, and that he'll join her after finishing his cigarette. He already called a driver. Yeonju thinks to herself that she would normally turn down the offer, but maybe it's because of the whisper earlier. She wonders if she can stay with him a little longer. She wants to be with him, just a bit more. Looking at the drink in her hand that Lee Jr. gave her, Jinan asks if she plans to drink it later. He takes it from her and pours it away, saying, "See you later." After Yeonju gets out of the car, she thanks Jinan for the ride and hurries away. As she walks off, Jinan starts thinking back to the first day he met her. He remembers how she used to work late to keep up with her job. She was the only employee he had met like that, and he noticed that she had been in the same department for a long time without transferring. She was also really fast at handling tasks. Most of the team's workload fell on the lower-level accounting staff, and Jinan had set up a work chart to stop anyone from working overtime. He thought he was managing the team well, and that everything was running smoothly. But then he overheard some staff talking about Yeonju. They mentioned that she seemed to be getting less overtime pay lately, and that she kept asking if there was anything she could help with. They said it seemed like her home life was tough, and they started blaming Jinan for taking away her extra income. That hit him hard, like someone had struck him on the head. He continued thinking about how he always noticed her when she focused on her work. He had a rule to never mix personal feelings with work, but he found himself breaking that rule. For the first time, he felt like he was the one being affected. One night, when he was completely drunk, Yeonju casually mentioned a one-night stand. He was surprised by her light-hearted attitude, but he felt relieved that he was the one who stayed with her until the end of the night. He wondered if the person standing next to her even mattered to her. He had seen her crying on the phone once, saying she didn't have any money. Jinan hadn't confused her for a romantic partner, but every time he saw her, he felt something pulling at his heart. He remembered the first time he heard her voice, and how she acted like nothing was wrong. She seemed to brush it off, but he wished he could protect her. He snapped out of his thoughts, decided to follow her, and wondered what her place looked like. As he got closer, he heard yelling from inside. "Ungrateful brat," someone shouted. "Yeonju is thrown out of her aunt's house." She pleads with her, but her aunt tells her she's making a big deal over a small amount of money. Her aunt says ever since Yeonju started showing off her job at a big company, this was bound to happen. She claims she doesn't need any money from Yeonju, and instead promises to make sure Yeonju can never show her face at the company again. Yeonju begs her to hold off and says she will give her the money she asked for. Her aunt sneers, asking if she has any shame left. Her aunt lifts her hand to hit her, but Jinan stops her. He calmly suggests they talk things through and pushes her away. He turns to Yeonju and asks who the woman is. Yeonju pleads for him to let her go, but he won't. She finally admits that the woman is her aunt. Tears fall from her eyes as she continues to beg him to let it go. Jinan asks what kind of aunt would do this to her and grabs her hand, telling her to follow him. She asks where they are going, but he just tells her to follow. She tries to tell him she needs to pack her things, but he insists he will get her new ones and she should just come with him. Her aunt yells at them, but her son comes rushing out and tells her to stop. Jinan takes Yeonju to his house and asks her to make herself comfortable. He offers her a drink and notices how upset she looks. He asks her what's wrong. Yeonju replies that it doesn't feel like he's her team leader with the way he's acting. Jinan laughs at that and asks if that woman was really her aunt. He firmly tells her to never go back to that house again. Yeonju says that she was planning to be independent, but things got in the way. She says today was the last day she planned to pick up her things, and now that everything is cut off, she won't be seeing her aunt again. She asks Jinan to pretend like they've never met, and as she cries, she hopes he won't think of her. Jinan watches her for a moment and wonders to himself how he can just forget what he's seen. He's started to care about her. He leaves the living room, feeling bitter and unsettled seeing her so alone and sad. Jinan asks Yeonju to stay with him for now. He tells her the house belongs to him, so she doesn't need to feel uncomfortable. She can stay as long as she wants. She says it's not possible, but he quickly clarifies that he's not asking for them to sleep together. He shows her a room that's been vacant for a while but assures her the cleaner keeps it tidy, so she doesn't have to worry about cleaning it herself. Yeonju stays silent, and Jinan grows uncomfortable. He tells her at least answer him when he's talking. He says that having pride is fine, but only in moderation. He asks her if she can't see her situation for what it is. He points out that it's late, and she's dressed the way she is with a torn-up bag, walking around at this hour, and it drives him crazy. Yeonju quickly apologizes, but he asks her to stop apologizing for once. He admits he's not great at talking or being considerate. Yeonju tells him she has to leave early because of a video conference at 7 a.m. He tells her to open the fridge and have some breakfast. She can just close the door when she leaves, and it'll lock automatically. He wishes her good night. The next day, Yeonju finds a cup of hot tea on the counter. She wonders if she can have it, and after tasting it, she feels good. On her way out, she runs into a woman, Deputy Park Se-hee, who asks who Yeonju is and if she just came from Jinan's house. Rumors have been circulating that Deputy Park Se-hee and Jinan have been dating since the new employee training. Everyone supports the idea, because both come from wealthy families and are at the top of their class. Yeonju greets her and asks if she knows Jinan. Se-hee introduces herself as a member of his team. Yeonju lies, saying she had a video conference earlier that morning and that Jinan left some important materials behind, so she's there to pick them up. Se-hee seems to think something else is going on and hands Yeonju a snack she prepared for Jinan, asking her to give it to him. Yeonju takes it and heads to the office. Jinan arrives at the office and finds Yeonju there. She greets him, and he notices a sandwich on the desk, asking if it's for him. He didn't expect that from her. She explains that Deputy Park Se-hee gave it to her for him. Jinshin then asks if she met Se-hee this morning. Hee-ju says yes and tells him that Se-hee asked why she was there. She told her she was just picking up some urgent materials, and reassured him that he probably doesn't need to worry too much. Jinshin is surprised and asks why he shouldn't worry. He then asks what she thinks about the situation. He wonders if she thinks he's the kind of man who would sleep with one woman and flirt with another. Hee-ju says that she thinks it could be troublesome if the word got out at the office, but it's not for any other reason. He tells her that if he was worried about things like that, he wouldn't have let her into his house in the first place. He asks her what she was thinking when he allowed her to stay there. Hee-ju pleads with him, saying she had nowhere else to go, and he was kind enough to let her stay just for a while. He's surprised and then asks her if she's unaware of his feelings, or if she's just pretending not to know. He steps closer to her, holding her gently. He says that holding her close wouldn't mean anything, but he wants something more. As he caresses her face, she pulls back. He tells her to go home after work and stop making him worry, but she refuses to go back to his house. She says she has no reason to stay there anymore, and he doesn't have to go that far for her. Jinshin starts to feel like he might have wronged her and asks what he has done to make her feel this way. She tells him that it doesn't make sense. No matter how much she doesn't have anywhere else to go, it's still not right for her to live in his house as his subordinate. Jinshin wonders if they've ever talked about something like this before. Hee-ju asks him what she's supposed to say. He looks at her in surprise as she asks him what she's supposed to say if people ask why she's staying at his house. She's still thinking about his position as a team leader and how she feels uncomfortable, especially about not being able to tell Deputy Park the truth. She reminds him of what she said earlier, that she had a video conference this morning, and she came to pick up some important materials that the team leader left behind. Hee-ju opens up to him, telling him that she doesn't like how she ended up bringing a sandwich made by Deputy Park for him. She says maybe he can do whatever he wants, but that doesn't apply to her. Jinshin is surprised to hear that she thinks they are not in a relationship. Before she can say more, he cuts in, asking who gave her the right to decide when it ends. He hands her the house key and tells her not to behave like Deputy Park. He questions why she would fulfill a personal request from someone in another department. He says that if it's not work-related, she should refuse it, and if anyone asks, just say it was his instruction. When Hee-ju enters the office, the assistant manager points out that she's early. Hee-ju greets her, and the assistant manager notices her face and asks if something's wrong. Hee-ju says everything is fine and reports that she already dropped off the materials the assistant manager asked for from the admin team. The assistant manager thanks her, and Hee-ju responds politely. Later, Hee-ju locks the house key in her locker. Meanwhile, Executive Director Park Tae-won and Manager Kim Young-jae are having a meeting. The director asks if he's learned anything about team leader Kang Jinshin. Manager Kim answers, saying that Jinshin isn't someone the director needs to worry about. He describes him as a typical workaholic with no one watching his back. He adds that Jinshin's ability to distinguish between authority and rank seems more related to his upbringing in the United States than anything else, which reminds the executive director of their past experiences with him. Jinshin asks the executive director if the agent fee for Youngshin Corporation, which Hee-ju had mentioned to him, was something the director had authorized. The director responds with another question, asking where Youngshin Corporation is located. Jinshin points out that the agent commission is set higher than with other companies, and he has no intention of confirming that commission. The director, feeling frustrated, thinks to himself that in his 30 years of working, he's never met anyone as rude and disrespectful as Jinshin. He replies that he doesn't know much about it yet since he's only recently joined the company. He adds that there are industry practices in place and, sometimes, to survive in the workplace, one has to understand the situation and move on. He tells Jinshin not to be foolish. Jinshin, however, insists that he was brought to the overseas team because of his knowledge of industry practices. As the team leader, he plans to remove any unnecessary elements to achieve results. The director is even more frustrated with him and points out that Jinshin still hasn't answered his question, although he understands his point. The director wonders if Jinshin thinks he's the chairman's son or if he has some sort of special connections. In the present day, Director Park wonders if Jinshin will be made the head of the Chinese corporation. The manager replies that it seems like they plan to keep him focused on the overseas side of things, because he's specialized in that area. He also mentions that the HR team has a high level of trust in Jinshin, and there are rumors that they'll offer him incentives during next year's salary negotiations. The manager believes Jinshin will become the youngest executive in the group. The director thinks about how Jinshin's personality might help him succeed, but wonders what someone like him has to do with holding an executive position. He decides that not everyone can be a star. The director then asks the manager if they are looking for a team leader at the Busan branch and tells him to look into it. The manager agrees and is sent off to get the task done. The director calls the president, asking about his health and how his wife is doing. He also asks if they enjoyed their last trip, and if the resort he recommended was a good choice. After a few pleasantries, he tells the president that there's something he wants to discuss. Meanwhile, Yeonju stands at the train station, her mind still on her team leader. She never went back to his house, and he just left her alone. They pass each other in the office several times a day, acting like they don't know each other. Even their usual meetings at the hotel, which used to happen at least once a week, have completely stopped. Yeonju wonders if this is really the end of it. It hurts her so much that she can barely sleep, but she tries to convince herself that everything has returned to normal, that they are both back where they belong. As the train approaches, the station announces that all passengers should step back. That's when Yeonju hears her name. It's the assistant manager. She asks if Yeonju usually takes this train, and Yeonju replies that she's moved out and is living independently now. The assistant manager, surprised, says she's jealous of her. She admits that she wanted to live alone and is tired of her mother constantly nagging her. It's already closing time, and the assistant manager comments that it looks like it's going to rain. Yeonju thinks about her aunt, who had demanded 30 million won for medical bills and the care she had given her. Yeonju asked if she could pay half so she could save some money for a studio near the company, but that's when everything fell apart. Unable to handle the pressure, she ended up transferring the full amount her aunt demanded. With only 5 million won left in her account, she found a small studio apartment on the outskirts. Even in her new place, she can't shake his face from her mind. Every time she feels lonely, his image appears. She tries to distract herself with other things, but no matter what she does, she ends up thinking about him. It was during a team gathering in February, not long after Jinshin joined the team. That day was also her birthday. Her aunt had yelled at her over the phone because she hadn't received her pay for the week. The seaweed soup at the restaurant was meant to be a complimentary dish, but it made her feel unexpectedly sad. The alcohol felt sweet, like it was helping her forget. That was when Jinshin found her, asking what she was still doing there. She turned the question back on him, asking what he was doing there. He guessed she was drunk, saying that explained why she had been drinking so much. He promised to get a cab for her and asked her to wait for a moment. He then offered her another drink. The cab arrived soon after, and he offered her a ride. She was happy he couldn't hear her thoughts, even though she was drunk. She told him she'd see him tomorrow. The driver asked where she was going, and she said Dogam. Jinshin got into the car and suggested they have a drink together. She never expected it would end up just being the two of them drinking. She couldn't remember much about their conversation, but she clearly remembered the last thing she said to him that night, "Team leader, can't you stay with me a little longer today?" She held his hand, and that's when their secret relationship started. She wished it had ended there, but she felt like she went too far. Now, she's alone, lost in her thoughts, when her phone beeps. She guesses it's her grandmother. Her phone rings, and when she opens her eyes, she sees it's a message from Jinan. He asks if she has any plans for the day. She quickly reads it, and then his last words come rushing back to her. Are you unaware, or are you just pretending not to know? Those words echo in her mind over and over. No matter how much she thinks about it, she can only come to one conclusion. Looking at their differences in personality and background, she realizes they can't have a relationship. She tells herself that she needs to focus on staying at the company and making a living. If she gets greedy, she might lose everything, her job, and maybe even him. She drifts off to sleep, lost in these thoughts. Suddenly, her phone rings again. She opens her eyes and sees that it's him calling. She wonders what he wants now, or if something is going on. She picks up the phone, and he immediately asks why she didn't pick up earlier. She apologizes, saying she was sleeping. He asks if nothing happened, really, if she just fell asleep. She tells him yes. He says okay, and then she asks if something is wrong. He replies that he just wanted to make sure everything is fine. She asks if he's outside her house, but he tells her to get some rest because she sounds tired. Her heart races. She asks if he's nearby, and he comments that she's quick to catch on in situations like this. He says he's leaving, but she rushes to the window and asks him to wait just a moment, wondering if he can stay for a little longer. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, ciao.